I think we're dealing with something very different with the Quran. The
Okay.
Quran comes 600 years after Jesus,
Okay.
and it comes in a time frame where, so the Bible is 66 books written over a period of 1,600 years on 3 different continents by close to 40 different authors in 3 different languages. The Quran is one book. It comes in one language, Hijizi script Arabic. It comes from one location, the Arabian Peninsula. And it appears, at least if we're taking the traditional narrative, to have one author. If we're talking about, if we want to give kind of credence to the traditional Islamic narrative with Muhammad. I think part of the problem, though, is that the Quran has very little awareness of what's actually going on in the Old and the New Testament. I mean, I see no indication that the author of the Quran had read any of the Old or the New Testament. Muhammad is said traditionally in the Islamic narrative to have been illiterate. And even if he was literate, it's not entirely clear whether the Old or New Testaments would have been translated into Arabic in a way that he would have been able to get the information from anyways in his time. However, the traditional narrative ascribes Muhammad as being a 7th century Arab caravaner. And so what we get within the narratives of the Quran are things that are floating around orally by Christians and Jews and Zoroastrians that are kind of adjacent to the stories that we find within the said scriptures of those religious worldviews. And I think that's exactly what we draw out when we analyze the data of the stories of, say, Abraham or Moses or David or Jesus or Mary or John the Baptist in the Quran. What you're getting kind of sifted through oral stories, mostly that are folk tales about these individuals. There's only one quoted verse of either the Old or the New Testament in the Quran, and that's the Lex Talionis, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now compare that to the close to 900 either direct quotations or allusions of the Old Testament in the New Testament. It's not even close. The New Testament is a Jewish-saturated document that comes directly out of the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament. Whereas the Quran is kind of in its own category and actually confuses and conflates a number of stories. So I was sitting down with a friend the other day and he was showing me some, he does a lot of Muslim evangelism and apologetics, and there are a number of stories in the Quran where they take, say, stories from Exodus, Judges, and 1st and 2nd Kings and squish it all together in that the details seem to be mixed up. And if you know the Bible stories, you start reading and you go, wait a minute, that's the wrong guy being told to go down and collect water. And if his army, laps the water up like a dog, then, do a certain things with that group. And then if they use their hands to cup the water into their mouth, then do something else with that group, right? That's the story of Gideon.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
But if I'm remembering correctly, I think they ascribe that to Moses in the Quran. I could be wrong about that. Either way, so I'm going off the top of my head.
Okay.
These stories are squished together. Where in the Esther story, who is Xerxes' right-hand man? What's his name?
Haman?
Haman. So Haman, that's a Persian name in a Persian context, right, with King Xerxes. In the Quran, that is the right-hand man for Pharaoh in the Exodus story. So we're getting all these details confused. So I don't think the Quran is on the same standing at all. Not only that, but I think the Quran has a bigger issue in that in chapter 3, verse 3 of the Quran, it says that God, Allah, sent down to Muhammad a book and truth, right? That is the Quran, confirming that which came before it. And that he revealed that truth in the Torah and the Gospel. So we have that in chapter 3, but then we have this really big issue throughout the Quran where then in chapter 5 it says something similar. It says, say, O people of the book, you are standing on nothing until you uphold the law of the Torah and the Gospel, and that which has been revealed to you from your Lord, and that which has been revealed to you from your Lord will surely increase many of them in transgressions and disbelief, so do not grieve over the disbelieving people. And we have this continual refrain within the Quran that God sent down the Torah to Moses, sent down the gospel to Jesus, and sent down the Quran to Moses. And then it kind of comes to its culmination. And this is the verse that I bring up to my Muslim friends when I'm talking with them. Because in chapter 5, verse 46 and 47, you have once again this chain of custody. We sent, following the footsteps, Jesus, the son of Mary, confirming that which came down before him in the Torah, right? The Torah was given to Moses, and we gave him the gospel, right? So then the gospel confirms the Torah, in which was guidance and light, confirming that which preceded it in the Torah as guidance and instruction for the righteous. Okay, so now we have, these links, right? Keep in mind, if you picture a visual chain with links, okay, you have the Torah, you have the gospel, and then you have the Quran. And then verse 47 of chapter 5 of the Quran says, and let people of the gospel, right, that's you and me, Christians, judge by what Allah has revealed therein. Well, what has Allah been revealed to the Christians? Well, that's the gospel. It's already stated in the previous verse. But it says, whoever does not judge by what Allah has revealed, then it is those who are the defiantly disobedient. Now, this is a problem, right? Because if the Muslim wants to assert that, say, the gospel, because it's been corrupted, is not the gospel that is being referred here, then either this verse has no context and has no application to me as a Christian today, or Allah was not able to preserve that, document, which, we know exactly what the Gospels looked like in Muhammad's day in the 7th century. Or he allowed it to be corrupted for some reason or other. But even if all those things are true, how then do I not be the defiantly disobedient? Because I'm told to judge by what has been revealed to me in the gospel. And if I do that, and I see that the Quran is telling me as a person of the gospel, a Christian, to judge by the gospel, if I judge the Quran by the gospel, I find the Quran has no earthly idea what is in the gospel and actually contradicts the gospel multiple times. Chapter 5, verse 157 denies the crucifixion outright. And so I would say if the Quran is true and I try to obey it, then the Quran is false. Because the statements that the Quran makes to me as a Christian here in chapter 5, verse 46 and 47, merits that in order for me to not be the defiantly disobedient, I have to judge the gospel by the gospel. And if I judge by the gospel, I find that the Quran doesn't understand the gospel. So there are a number of things going on, I think, with Islam.
Wow.
I think historically there are some big issues, chief of which, it denies the crucifixion. And you can read some of the most skeptical New Testament scholars out there. Bart Ehrman himself, if we can know anything about Jesus, we know that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. And so if you're going to deny that, you're really going up against the entirety of the testimony of what we do know about Jesus, even by the most skeptical standards.
Now, I was watching your episode on PBD podcast, and I remember you were getting into some of these details about the Quran there as well. And I remember you talking about this idea of controlled transmission.
Whenever you browse the internet or visit any website, you're leaving traces of your personal data. Data brokers are then selling that personal information, often without your knowledge and in many cases without your consent. I didn't fully grasp how pervasive this was or really understand the risk associated with it until more recently. Let's take the recent Grubhub data breach, for example. Hackers reportedly gained access to over 17 million user accounts using stolen credentials, exposing sensitive information like names, emails, addresses, partial payment data. And that's just one of many breaches happening behind the scenes. That's why I want to tell you guys about a company called Incogni. They offer a genuinely helpful service. They track down where your personal data has been leaked and scrub it from those rather shady databases. They handle the legal headaches of requesting your information to be removed, which not only restores your online privacy and security, but it also saves you a ton of time and stress. Trust me, I learned this the hard way myself. It's a huge relief knowing that your information is not floating around for bad actors to take advantage of and abuse. Incogni also helped me cut down on spam calls, junk emails, etc. So break up with Scam Likely. Take back control of your online privacy. Head to incogni.com/doseofwisdom or use the promo code doseofwisdom to unlock 60% off the annual plan. Again, that's incogni.com/doseofwisdom or use the promo code doseofwisdom at checkout to save big, protect your digital life. Now back to the video.
From the conversations I've had, this is a big deal for Muslims, is that we've got one word of God, and you guys have all these problems with ESV, KJV, etc.
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, that's a bit of a red herring because we don't have different versions. We have different English translations, right? They're not different Bibles. They're just different iterations of the rendering of the text in the original language, which in one way the Muslim doesn't have the issue of, because even though there are, say, English translations of the Quran, my Muslim friends will tell me, even though I've read the Quran cover to cover a few times now, that I have never read the Quran because the Quran only exists in Arabic. So if we're talking about the historical reality...
Sorry to interrupt you, but can I ask this question on that point before I forget it? Is
Sure.
it true that 80% of Muslims globally can't read Arabic and therefore can't read the real Quran?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I don't know the statistics now. I mean, I was investigating this probably about 5 years ago. I always tell the story. I had this friend. He was from Indonesia back when I was in university doing my undergrad. He was an older guy, and we'd meet together, and we'd read the Quran and the Bible, and I was sort of trying to be an influence in his life. I think he was realistically trying to convert me as well. But in our back and forth, at one point, I remember it was over Ramadan, because during this time, what I would do is he would be reading the Quran cover to cover during a span of the 30 days of Ramadan. And so I would do that with him because the Quran is not actually that long. It's not like reading the entire Bible in one go. It's approximately the size of the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So you can do it. It's not light reading or short reading. But he didn't actually know Arabic. But he could pronounce Arabic phonetically. And he had almost memorized the entire Quran phonetically. And he said to me, Wes, I love Islam. I love the daily prayers. I love fasting during Ramadan. I love reciting the Quran. And one day I would like to get a translation in my own language so I know what it says. And to him, it was less about the content of the Quran and more kind of this devotional aspect of memorizing it phonetically and praying it. So at least for him, he didn't know Arabic at all. He spoke English and he spoke Indonesian. And so I think that's, I don't want to hypothesize about how true that is for how many Muslims. But I think if you were actually to go around the world and ask, it might be true for a shocking amount of people who adhere to the Islamic faith.
Okay, and I got you on a side trail there, but I was curious about that. We were going to go into the primary question I was asking about the Quran.
Yeah. So the free transmission versus the controlled transmission.
Yes.
So historically, there are kind of three facts of a freely transmitted text that you want to look at that will outline it as freely transmitted. And so the first is that the more manuscripts one has, the more variants one will have, right? The more copies, particularly handwritten, the more variants and differences between the manuscripts you're going to find. The second is if you only have one witness, you will have no textual variants, but you will likewise have little basis upon which to believe you have the original text. And that's because you cannot do comparative analysis to figure out what has been inserted or deleted. And then the third is that the more witnesses you have, the more confidence you have that you have the original text. So despite the more copies you have leading to more textual variants, the fact that you have variation allows you to do things like comparative textual analysis to figure out why and when things were added in. So what we have with the Quran is what we have with the New Testament is a text whose transmission is not controlled by an external authority such as a government, and it's widely copied without constraint. And so this is what I deal with in my doctoral work. I look at manuscripts from the 2nd and 3rd century, and you can tell that a good portion of them are not copied by professional scribes because of the just nature of some of the mistakes that happen in the text. Now, the flip side of that is a controlled transmissional text, which is a text whose transmission is one that is copied under the guidance of an external authority. And this is exactly what we see within the Quran. We see that the Quran is kind of overseen by the external authority of what happened after Muhammad's death. So Muhammad dies in 632, and that's recorded in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, which is the kind of authoritative documents for Islamic tradition for the life of Muhammad. So it's traditionally called the Hadith. So Muhammad dies 632, and then right after that, you have a number of battles that take place between the Arabs and the Muslims. And this time is called the Wars of the Apostasy. Now, it's been hypothesized that part of that is because some of these tribes that were forcibly converted by Muhammad find out that Muhammad is dead, and they go, well, we actually never converted to begin with, and so we're not Muslims anymore. And so the Muslims who are taking over from Muhammad say that's not going to fly, and they go out and they try to reconvert people. And this period of time is known as the Wars of the Apostasy. And there's a particular war that happens in 632, just after Muhammad's death, called the Battle of Yomama. It's really easy to remember because it's your mama is a big battle to fight. And so at the Battle of Yomama, you have a number of individuals who die, like a significant number of individuals who die who had memorized the Quran. Because at this point, the Quran was oral, it was not written. And so the word Quran means, if I'm remembering correctly, it means like written down, right? Sorry. The word Quran means
recitation.
Recitation. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, thank you. And so there was this group of people who had memorized the Quran, who were known as the Qurra, right? Same sort of linguistic root in the word. They had memorized the recitation, and so a number of these key Qurra had died at the Battle of Yamama. And so the leader who had succeeded Muhammad at this time was a guy named Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr had people come to him and say that, this is going to be an issue after the Battle of Yamama. And so the Hadith actually say that a number of Quranic verses had been written on palm stalks and white stones and camel bones. And so they had written down or smooth rocks, pieces of parchment, and camel bones. And so there were a number of verses of the Quran, but they realized that there was some differentiation in the recitations. And so that takes place, and that starts the process by Abu Bakr to codify, collect the different recitations and write them down. However, that doesn't kind of come to its entire fruition until I believe it's 650 to 656 with Uthman. So Uthman succeeds Abu Bakr, and he finishes this process. And I believe it's because they came to Uthman, and the phrase that was used, which I think I quoted to Patrick Bet David, was save this nation before they differ about the book, like the Jews and Christians before us. And so in order to standardize things and make sure there's no disagreements, Uthman collects all the different writing down of the Qurans that he can find that happened under individuals like Abu Bakr, and then he standardizes the text and he destroys all the other variations. So this is a controlled transmission of the Quran, right? Instead of there being variants and variations and different textual traditions, you just develop one and you destroy all the others. Now, this isn't to say that there aren't other types of Qurans. There actually are other types of Qurans. There's the Hafs and the Warsh Quran traditions. So the Hafs, I believe, is 97% of Muslims who are reading the Quran around the world are reading a Hafs printing. And about 3% of Muslims around the world, I think mainly in North Africa, are reading a Warsh printing of the Quran. And the printing of the Quran, if you say go on Amazon and purchase a Quran, it's a Egyptian printing from 1924. And it's not a scholarly one. It was just like kind of the standardized one. So you have kind of two layers of standardization in the controlled transmission of the text. You have the original one that happened back in the 7th century under Uthman, in the Uthmanic revision or ascension. And then you have the 1924 Egyptian printing that took place, which is if you buy a Quran online, that's what you're going to get.
I'll leave a link in the description where you can watch a documentary that I made. It's got Nabil Qureshi, Lee Strobel, William Lane Craig, and a bunch of other people in there that answer a lot of the questions that I've had about God over the years. I think you'll really like it, and it's totally free.